I've been the best ever since day one when I walked into this company, and I've been vilified and hated since that day because Paul Heyman saw something in me that nobody else wanted to admit. That's right, I'm a Paul Heyman guy.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. Here on the channel, I can be quite critical of Marvel, DC, and certain creators, and a lot of times I hear the feedback. Wes, why don't you just stop reading DC? Why don't you stop reading Marvel? Well, I've got a friend of mine here. He's been reading comics a lot longer than I have. We do call him the Marvel aficionado for a reason. Doc, you are equally critical of Marvel and some of their creators. Well, welcome to the channel, Doc. My bad.
It's all right, man. Hey, we can just jump into it. Everybody knows who my dumbass is at this point.
Well, you're equally critical, even more so, of certain things within Marvel and some of their creators. Specifically, you are a Marvel guy, although you do dabble in DC. Why don't you just give Marvel up? Why have you decided to stick around, even though they tend to piss you off a little bit? Maybe a lot bit.
Because I really like the characters. I really, really do. I have an emotional, long-term attachment to it. It's basically, I mean, yeah, of course, I'm basically in an abusive relationship with them, but, you know, I guess I got battered dude syndrome. I don't know. I mean, look, I love these characters. You know, the reason why I love comics is because of X-Men. Like, that was my book that got me reading comics. I'm like, holy crap. Like, you know, it was really interesting, great characters that all had their own voices, all had their own powers, all had their own problems. And they were weaving some, you know, I mean, look, I liked wrestling for the same reason. It was like a male soap opera. You know, it was ridiculous. It was outside of, you know, the realm of reality, but it was basically a male soap opera. Now I grew out of wrestling a little bit, but I never really grew out of comics. You know, but it's the same general concepts. You know, good versus evil, everybody plotting to, you know, counteract the moves of somebody else, like the machinations of their villain, and them trying to be an idol or a force for good in the world. You know, it's cheesy. It's a little, is it maybe a little childish? Sure. But I don't really care. It's fun. And I love these characters because that's what brought me into reading comics. If it's not for Spider-Man and the X-Men, I just don't care about comics. I don't care about it as a storytelling medium. Like, I'm not super in love with the medium of comics. It's just a very, very good way for me to read about these characters that I really like on a monthly basis. It's a good medium for it.
You did mention, you know, it might be childish. You know, you're a grown man. I think you're a few years younger than I, but, you know, we're basically the same age demographics. You know, you hear that, you know, why don't you grow up? Why are you so defensive with these characters and stuff? And it's like, well, you know, I work a lot. I work really hard. And I have a lot of things to do, you know, take care of my kids and everything. I want to be able to, you know, go off and do my own thing. And if it's something that some people consider childish, it's none of their business.
Yeah.
I know you work really hard. You have to, you know, only do you work hard, you know, obviously to maintain your salary, your job and all that, but you're also working every weekend to maintain your house, build on additions, you know, upgrade it and stuff like that. Why do you think people get bent out of shape when you decide that the way that you're going to express yourself or maybe get some R&R, you know, in the comfort of your own home is by reading a comic book? I always thought that was a weird criticism of actual readers.
For the same reason that if I built model cars and then somebody came in and said, your model cars are bad, we need to change them, I'd say, go fuck yourself. Because this is the thing that I like. It's the thing that I like doing. And somebody wants to come in and change what my hobby is. I mean, I don't go and tell people how they're allowed to, you know, what clothes they're allowed to sew or what patterns they're allowed to buy if they're if sewing or knitting is their hobby.
Or what beer you have to brew if you got a home brewery.
Exactly. I don't tell them what trails they're allowed to hike if they like going hiking and shit. It's my hobby. That's what it comes down to. It's my hobby, and I'm going to spend my goddamn money like an adult the way I want to.
Yeah, because I worked hard for it. I could do whatever I want with it. And the whole man baby thing, you always hear that as a derogatory term towards people that maybe other folks feel are too attached to Star Wars or comic books or other forms of entertainment. I don't think man baby, I don't think is a very good descriptor for what I am. But if that's what you want to call me, I really don't care at this point.
Oh yeah, it doesn't impact.
How hard do you work for your money?
Yeah, exactly. They can that is a descriptor that really, it does not even remotely bother me, because most of the time it feels like very much projection. I'm the one that gets pissed off because you're changing my thing. You're the one that was acting like a child because my thing wasn't how you wanted it. Which one's more childish? The one demanding the thing that they don't like currently get changed into something they do, or the one that's complaining that you came in and screwed up the thing they were already working on? I'm gonna go with number one, but hey,
you made that a lot more complicated, Doc. I'm a man baby. I cannot process such complicated ideas.
Yeah, exactly. But look, that's a ridiculous accusation. I mean, it's fine. You want to call me that, whatever. But I also don't give a shit about my pronouns either. So you can call me she for all I care. Doesn't affect me.
Not really.
No, like, somebody else's term or descriptor for me really doesn't impact me in any negative or positive way whatsoever. Especially when it's somebody I don't care about.
So Doc, you've been reading comics, essentially your adolescence, through your young adult age, all the way through your adult years now.
Yeah.
And you are very defensive of your hobby, the characters that you love, the story arcs that you've invested in that people might tinker with nowadays when maybe they'll go and change something retroactively, maybe do a retcon here or there. Obviously, there's some that we enjoy more than others.
Yeah, of course.
Do you think that you can be too defensive of your hobby, or maybe you can be too resistant to change? Because I feel like I'm perfectly okay with change within the confines of the character or the world that's been built. My issue with the change is when they decided that they don't like the world that was built or the confines with the character and the descriptor of what the character represents, and they'd have to alter the character to fit the whims and machinations of the writer themselves, rather than the writer fitting their story to the character in the universe.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I mean, like my complaint that even like Batman or Wolverine or Spider-Man or Superman or Wonder Woman or She-Hulk or Black Widow, they are who they are because they were built to be that way. And initially, like I like the whole, in their first appearance, they didn't actually do this. Yeah, you know what? Well,
Superman didn't fly. Truth, justice, and the American way wasn't associated with Superman.
Yeah, well, what happens is kind of like when you're born, you are not a fully formed adult. And as you grow and experience things, you figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what you like, what you don't like. And eventually it forms your personality over a period of time. But once you have formed your personality, you generally don't change that too much, do you? I mean, well,
and if you do, your friends notice it.
Exactly. Your friends notice it.
Is everything okay? Like, you don't seem the same. Like, you've been really argumentative lately, or you've been really quiet. Normally you're much nicer. Is there something you need to talk about? Because people notice these type of changes as far as the way people conduct themselves or the way they're feeling.
Yeah. And like most of these superheroes, we're seeing them at their origin. And you know what? Early on, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to try to figure out who they are. Now, Does the writer sometimes get the free pass early on to forget the thing that the aspect that they introduced in issue 1, but by issue 10, when they realize that aspect of the character is not working? Yes, they get that freedom the same way, because they're not, comic book characters aren't actual people. Somebody else needs to do the self-actualization and the realization of their personality for them, and that's called the writer. So early on, the writer's throwing stuff at the wall to figure out what fits. But once you've established who that character is, and then they gain a following for being that character, once you start actively changing those things, it becomes confusing. It becomes something that people don't like. You've now formed a character, and people would start, as you said, they'd recognize it. The readers absolutely recognize it. The characters that they're interacting with should, if you were a halfway decent writer, recognize it and address that. Like, hey, if my buddy starts randomly acting really out of character, hey, maybe he's got a drug problem I didn't know about, or maybe he's going through some shit at home, but I ask him about it and I figure out why. There's got to be a reason. But you can't just to be like, oh no, this is just who I am now. Then I don't want to be hanging out with you anymore. That's.
I think one of the problems, like being a fan of the big two, is a majority of the readers are, like you said, invested in the characters first.
We are.
They're invested in the characters first. Now, you might get excited if there's a writer that you admire or you've liked their work on another character. You're like, man, that guy would be great on this character, my favorite character. They come over and you're excited about it. But I think that's one of the things. There aren't very many writers like that right now, Doc, by the way.
No.
Just point that out. I think that's one of the things that maybe the writers currently at DC and Marvel, the editorial staff, certainly don't understand, and at Marvel, the Legion of Doofuses have no understanding of, is people aren't coming to the table for the most part for the writers. They're coming for the characters.
And when you keep changing them, people stop coming.
Well, unless they're Doc, you keep coming back for more. It's like you're like self-flagellation. You're just like beating yourself over the head with Wolverine. Like, why is this happening?
Yes, and I grant you, I will completely agree that I am doing this to myself. But it is like an addiction for many of us but it's not a harmful addiction. The only thing that we're harming is, essentially tacitly agreeing with the bullshit that the big two editorial staff does. Because I think you're wrong a little bit in the fact that they don't recognize that we come for the characters. I think the problem is they actually recognize it too much. And they believe that no matter what they do with those characters,
they'll keep coming back.
Will keep coming back. Now, but the critics that say, well, why do you keep coming back? They don't understand. They're the ones that think, well, the writer that you liked, he's over here doing this indie creator-owned thing. Okay, well, that's fine. I don't give a shit about that character. I like that writer. I think he's very creative. He hasn't made me give a shit about that character. The only reason I liked that writer was because he came onto a character that somebody else already made me give a shit about and made me care even a little bit more. That's why I like that writer. That's it.
Me personally, I love the characters. I'm also a writer-driven reader. So if Robert Venditti goes and works on a character or original projects, I'm absolutely going to read it just because I know that the quality is going to be good. But I get what you're saying. You kind of invest in these characters. And here's another thing. People are like, you should just walk away. You seem unhappy with the state of Wolverine, or you seem unhappy with the state of this or that right now. Why don't you just walk away? Because I've seen what happens if you silently just walk away from something. It will never get better.
Yes,
there will never be any positive change if you do not voice your criticism, if you do not express your discontent with the state of things, and if people don't do it collectively. If they go, you know what, I don't want to make a fuss. You know what's going to happen? Nothing changes. It's going to get worse. We've seen this time and time again, not just in comic books, in wrestling, in other forms of life. We're seeing it all over the place as far as culture right now within Western culture specifically. If you sit by silently and you do not protest when you see some bullshit, nothing will ever change. You can't sit by and not speak your mind, especially if you actually care about the characters. You have to stick around because nobody else is going to stick up for it.
Exactly. I mean, look, I understand the concept of think with your wallet or speak with your wallet. The problem is that is a silent commentary. You're giving a data point that of which the companies have absolutely no context for. They don't know if you're leaving because they changed the price. They don't know if they're leaving because you changed the paper quality. They don't know if you're leaving for the artist, the writer, the colorist, the fucking editor.
Maybe you lost your job, or you got no money.
Yeah, or you're just broke and you'll come back when you have more money. They don't know. So you have to the things you're speaking about, like being vocal about a complaint, is how you provide context. I don't have to take every penny away from Marvel and DC. You know why? Because they've already demonstrated that they don't actually care if you take every penny away. Because what do? They just come up with a new variant scheme and raise the prices while circulation rate drops into the 20,000s and then the 10,000s and then the under 10,000s on a book. They just keep raising the price. And now, as I've made the joke about a few times, the inevitable end result of this is one copy of a comic book for $10,000 to one guy that really wants to buy it. That last guy buying Batman is going to be paying $50,000 an issue for it. And I hope he at least gets the original art version. But that's the inevitable outcome. And until they reach that, they're not going to change. So you have, their logic is you stopped giving us money. We don't have to listen to you anymore. But their logic is also, you're still giving us money. So obviously what we're doing isn't that wrong.
So this is my point. People were like, why would you keep reading Tom King? You know that you don't like his writing. I don't like James Tynion's writing. But it's not because he does anything particularly bad with the characters. I think his stories are too decompressed, and he's just rehashing the same stories that have been told in Batman. Whatever. I don't talk about that stuff here on the channel. I don't hammer it hard. But you look at somebody like a Tom King, he's fundamentally altering characters. He's doing character assassination. I have to highlight this. I need to have that information up so when people see it, they recognize that they're not alone, that this is real, that you are not the only one seeing it, and then they could, sit there and feel hopefully empowered to go out there and voice their displeasure. People are like, why would you read Tom Taylor's work at DC after Deceased if you think what he's doing to Nightwing is wrong, or if you think he's absolutely fundamentally changing every aspect of Superman? Because he's destroying the character. If he was just writing a bad, boring story, I wouldn't give a shit. Once you start destroying the characters, I have to continuously highlight it because there are going to be new people each and every week. They're like, you know what? Last week was weird. I'm hoping this week is better. Oh, it got worse. Am I the only one? They can go out there. They'll find my video and be like, no, I'm not the only one. What Tom Taylor is doing to John Kent is wrong. Yeah. And you aren't alone. And that's why I continuously do this. It's not because I have a hate fetish on Tom Taylor or Tom King. I don't hate either one of them. I don't know the people. What I'm saying is what they're doing with the characters is wrong. And that's why I continue to voice my displeasure and highlight what these shitty writers are doing.
I do the exact same thing with Jason Aaron over at Marvel. He has spent his entire tenure there figuring out what the foundation of a character is and then breaking that, figuring out the foundation of a title, breaking it, figuring out.
But he never puts it back together. Deconstruction is a thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
it's effective.
We will never. Thor will never be fixed now because of Jason Aaron with making it a mantle. The X-Men and Wolverine will never be fixed again because of what Jason Aaron did with turning Wolverine into Dadverine. You can never undo these things that fundamentally break characters. You will like the nature of the Avengers will never be the same now that Jason Aaron got his hands on it. So everything he touches, he fundamentally alters and turns it into something.
Another one.
Yes. And they turn it into things that they weren't. A is A. Batman is Batman. If it comes back to that same thing. If they decide to, and that's the reason why I didn't like fucking Grant Morrison or Tom King on Batman, because they fundamentally altered the nature of Batman. Instead of just a kid whose dad got, or whose parents got killed, now it's some long-time spirit thing with millions of years of a bat god being involved. Fuck that shit.
Are you sure you're not talking about Scott Snyder?
Oh, wait, that was Scott Snyder. Whatever.
It might have been Grant Morrison too, but that sounds like some Scott Snyder stuff right there.
It might have been. I don't remember. But at the same time, same thing. Like that. It's the one part of like J. Michael Straczynski's run on Spider-Man that hasn't been retconned or in the process of being retconned that I really don't like. The whole spider god thing with the spider totems. Like, instead of just like a kid that got freakishly, the result of a freak accident, like that was fine. That was a good origin. It doesn't need to be any deeper than that. But when you start fundamentally changing things, it stops being the thing you like and starts being something else. So you can make changes within the confines. There's got to be walls. Like, I can walk into my living room. I mean, I like doing remodeling. If I walk into my living room and start painting the walls or rearranging furniture or putting up shelves or adding some other stuff here or there, it's one thing. But when I start busting down the fucking walls between it and my kitchen, it's no longer a living room. It's now a great room. It stopped being my living room and started being like a giant open concept. There's a difference in those things. I liked it the way it was. When I change it too fundamentally, it ceases being what it was.
So that's what I wanted to have this conversation with you, Doc. I knew you would understand. You would be able to contextualize and maybe provide some examples that are a little bit different for me, a different perspective. But for those of you that have been asking, why do you continue to read comics that you don't like? For the most part, I don't. You don't hear me talk about James Tynion's Batman unless it's on This Week in Batman Now. Before that, I wasn't reading it. He's not breaking the character. It's just a bad story. I don't care about that stuff. The stuff I highlight is fundamentally breaking characters, breaking universes. That's why I continue to read them. That's why I continue to highlight it here, because it's wrong. And I want to let other people know, hey, look for these things. You can identify them. And it's not wrong to express your displeasure. In fact, if you sit by silently as you see these things happening, you're really only going to contribute to more problems in the long term. I'm not going to stop. I'm just not. Even if it bothers you, you just don't have to watch the video, I guess, if it bothers you when I point out these recurring problems or new problems coming with some of these certain writers. Doc, I'll let you have the last word.
And I stick around with these characters in holding out some weird false hope, like, as I said, like a battered dude syndrome thing here.
Stockholm
maybe, syndrome. Like Stockholm. Well, not Stockholm syndrome. I don't.
Oh, you're not identifying with your abuser yet.
No, I'm not identifying with my abuser. I'm just hoping he eventually stops punching me in the face emotionally with the characters that I really, really love.